Today we're taking a perfectly good truck and completely disassembling it, turning metal into sparks, hitting some things with a hammer, and throwing away parts which we might need later on, all to improve the handling, traction, and looks of this Pro Touring inspired mini truck. We're back on the S10 build today, and it's completely tore apart. Last time you saw it, we just kicked the project off and we installed a new axle out back because it was stronger than the original and a little bit wider. But if you remember at the end of that video, I discovered the pinion angle was way wrong, so we completely tore it back apart and I fixed the problem. Basically, all I had to do was chop off the original spring perches and I welded on these replacements. But that also gave me the opportunity to fix this, which is the bump stop strike pad. The ZR2 Blazer axle, this guy here, originally had a big round bump stop strike pad, but the S10 truck doesn't use that. It uses this style. So I harvested this from the original axle from the truck, got it all welded on, repainted, brakes are on, lines are run. Basically, this is ready to go back underneath the truck, except I'm not done yet because I figured while I'm in there, there's a few more changes we should make. Two major ones. First being, I want to lower the truck because this is kind of going to be a Pro Touring-ish handling style truck. I'll do autocrosses and, you know, maybe a road course every now and then. I want it to be sportier, so it's going to be lower. And along those same lines, the second change we're making today is installing the rear sway bar. Again, because I'm in there, I figured it'll save time rather than taking the truck back apart in the future to make some of these changes. It's already apart. Why not just do it? So the sway bar, first thing that is, well, that's the first thing we'll take care of. You saw me weld these guys on in the last video. They're S10 Blazer sway bar brackets. So instead of using the big U-bolt, welded them directly to the housing for a little bit more strength. But the only problem is on the underside of the frame, there's no place to attach the end link on a S10 pickup that didn't come with a sway bar. Yes, they made the ZQ8 S10 handling package. Those brackets are out there. They're extremely expensive, but they won't work for me simply because I'm using a Blazer sway bar, which mounts in a little different position and is a little bit different length. So I'm basically going to have to mimic the brackets that the S10 Blazer had. Went to the junkyard the other day, took a couple of measurements, and basically all we're gonna do is, you can see the shock bracket here. This is my template. Basically, it's going to weld on the back of the shock mount, kind of attach up to the top of the frame, and then we'll have another layer. So there'll be two tabs on each side, all welded together, and that's where the end links are going to mount. And that hole that is already in the frame right there, that'll be where you can put your wrench through and get the nut for the back of the end link. Anyway, a little bit of fabricating to do. Two questions that had popped up, or one major question. On the pinion angle, people asked, why didn't I just throw a shim or a wedge between the axle and the spring to correct the problem? Well, 5-degree shim definitely would fix the pinion angle, and they make 5-degree shims all day long. But in my opinion, that is not the most correct way to solve the problem. Yes, it would work. I've used wedges before, and there's really nothing wrong with it, but it's not as right, again, in my opinion, as chopping the perches off and welding them on in the exact correct spot. That's just, it's one of those things where like my brain just won't let me let certain things go, and that's one of them. So that's, yeah, that's why we did that. Anyway, let's get some fabrication going and we'll get this axle back in the truck before you know it. Oh yeah, don't forget your safety glasses. All right, so we got the tabs made up, and more or less, you got a new end link there, they are gonna sit something like that. It's kind of hard to get them up in there because of the shape put together, but that's kind of sort of how they're going to go. So naturally, the next step is to weld them on the frame, which means we're doing things the hard way, and we're gonna start by taking the bed off. All right, so basically I'm gonna hold this little tab in here, and you need to put a tack weld like right there. So I've got both vertical tabs attached to the shock tower, and that's going to give us a nice solid place to mount the sway bar end links, you know, control body roll and all that good stuff to help this truck handle better. But there's one more thing I want to do to kind of mimic something the ZQ8 S10s used, which was a rear frame reinforcement. Now, they basically tied the shock mount together with a cross member back here. And I'm going to do something similar, but also tie into the sway bar link just to kind of beef up this whole area. Basically, we're going to make a plate that ties the shock mount to the cross member and that kind of in a triangle shape. It's going to bend down and just kind of, you know, beef up that area. I don't know if the truck really needs it, but they put it on the ZQ8, which was like their handling truck, so maybe it'll have some minor insignificant improvement. I think the big improvement is just going to be the fact that we'll have a sway bar back here and a lower center of gravity, of course. But we're in here. I need to make some sort of a top plate for this anyway, so why not just tie everything together and make it nice and strong. All right, so just got back from the drive shaft shop. They actually shortened it within 24 hours, which is awesome. They put a stronger joint on the back, balanced it so it's all set to go. Probably we'll have to shorten it again whenever we do the all-wheel drive conversion, but back on the road. But of course, we gotta make a stop and get a little pick-me-up before we get back to work. So, get some more cutting and welding, and we'll get that truck back on the ground as long as all my parts show up, which, if FedEx is on time, should be today. So basically what we're going to do is modify this bump stop, not to put it on the outside of the frame, but just to make it much lower profile so it still works as intended at a lower ride height. This is now my favorite part of the project because all the welding, the grinding, the cutting, the painting is done. The mess is cleaned up, the floor is swept, most of the tools are put away, and really all we have left to do is just bolt this thing back together, get it on the ground, and see what the new ride height looks like. And also, of course, enjoy the new handling because the back's going to be lower, it's going to have a sway bar, different springs, I'll show you that in a second. But basically, this is what it looks like. Visually, not a whole lot different right now. Relocated the bump stops to work with our new lower ride height. It should be about 3 inches lower than stock. We have our new sway bar mounts all welded up, tied in, painted. It's going to give a good solid place for the sway bar to mount. Chopped the exhaust off just because I wasn't sure if we'd have enough room with the lowered ride height for the tailpipe. I'll probably just end up chopping up what's left of the tailpipe to kind of put like a turn down or turn off to the side. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. We're just gonna get the axle back under the truck. We're lowering the truck 3 inches. I think I just mentioned that. We're using these leaf springs from Summit. They're meant for a 2-wheel drive S10, but pretty sure they're the same exact thing for a 4-wheel drive. That is the part number right there. Not sure if the camera picks that up, but yeah, pretty much let's get this thing put together. Oh, new shocks as well. I've got new Bilsteins, however you want to call them. Got some new shocks as well for the rear. So let's get this thing bolted together and back on the ground. All right, guys, it's the moment of truth. Let's see how low it is. With the truck on the ground, there is one calculation I might just barely have miscalculated, but also might just barely get lucky, and that's the shock length. Everything else is looking great. We got the truck on the ground. We got the drop springs in there. I love how the sway bar turned out. The links are perpendicular, just kind of how I wanted. And everything looks pretty much factory. And that's, if you guys have seen my videos before, you know I have this weird thing for like OEM style modifications. Like if the factory built a 2nd gen Cyclone that was low with all-wheel drive and extended cab, this is how I think the rear suspension should have been done. So really happy with how I turned out. Shock length right now, I measured these. I've got about 3.5 inches of compression remaining. I just hopped on the bumper a bunch of times, like up and down a ton, and I wasn't able to get the shocks to bottom out. So I think that we will be okay, but I'll just have to let you guys know how that goes. But yeah, the only thing I have left to do, two things actually. One, throw the drive shaft in, and two, weld on a little dump tube for the exhaust, because as you can see, it just kind of exits right there. And I actually have had trucks with exhaust dumps and sway bars, and it'll actually melt that bushing if you just kind of let the exhaust, you know, dissipate out. So I will put a turn down there just to try to get it below the axle and away from the shock boot, shock bushing, and sway bar bushing. But otherwise, we'll throw the drive shaft on and the exhaust on, and this truck will be done for now on the rear. Long term, this might not make sense, but long term, I probably will 4-link this thing. 4-link rear and coilover front suspension. This initial phase is just intended to be like a fun, call it OEM plus or a fun mild upgrade. And then, yeah, we'll rip it back apart. But it's also fairly budget for now. I mean, we got 2 shocks and we got 2 drop springs. All told, I think I've got like, let's see, $200 for the pair of the springs and like $150 for the shocks. So $350. The rest is just time. Now, I do have a lot of time in this project, which I am happy to invest. I mentioned this quite a bit, but my whole thing and my mantra and what I preach and tell my guys here at the shop is do everything to the absolute best of your ability. Don't cut corners, don't skimp. If you can do it all the way. Otherwise, what's the point? So that's my little soapbox for the day. Anyway, really happy with the progress so far on the name pending, 2nd gen Cyclone. Call it Copo Junior, call it, I don't have a name for this truck yet, but yeah, I'm off to there's no we, I always say we like there's multiple people. Anyway, we're off to a good start, and I am really excited to get the bed back on, which I will do next week once I get the exhaust welded, because you know what? It's going to be so much easier just to weld something up with the bed fully exposed. So that is today's progress. Thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. Come back soon because we have a lot more parts to install on the Copo Junior, Cyclone, Extreme, 2nd gen. Let me know what we should name this build. Thank you guys for watching. Come back soon.